everyone's bracing themselves for a $1,000 PS6, but it turns out it might be a lot cheaper than that. After that, we got even more evidence that Sony is sticking with consoles. And finally, I spent a lot of time with Crimson Desert over the weekend, so here's what I think so far. How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. This is PSReady, my channel all about PlayStation. I hope you specifically, are having a great week playing a ton of video games. Like I mentioned in the intro, I've been playing a lot of Crimson Desert. Let me know what you're playing down in the comments below. But let's get into the first news story here and talk about pricing, because pricing is going out of control. It's kind of funny because right when Sony increased the price of the PS5 and the PS5 Pro, news came out like hours after that this new algorithm was discovered by Google that makes it like 60% more efficient with the AI data centers. So like all of the RAM prices started crashing, and then OpenAI apparently like pulled back on their commitment to buy 40% of the world's RAM, which was a big factor into why everything has been so expensive lately. And then the prices started falling even more. So it looks like what Sony was doing was preemptively raising the price as much as they think they'll ever have to, and then hopefully they can adjust the price back down accordingly. That didn't stop people from going out and buying PS5 Pros though. All weekend my Twitter was absolutely full of people going and panic buying PS5 Pros. Not games, just the consoles. They were either trading in their base PS5 and upgrading to a PS5 Pro because GameStop kind of pounced on this and had a good deal, or they were just buying a PS5 Pro outright because obviously later this year, Grand Theft Auto 6 is coming out and they want to make sure they have a console and that they can hopefully afford the game when it drops, because we don't even know how much that game is going to cost. So because of the entire situation around the pricing with the PS5 and PS5 Pro, everyone's kind of like biting their nails like an old cartoon looking at the PS6, kind of expecting it to be $1,000. And I don't think that's unwarranted considering what Xbox is doing with the Project Helix. They're going for max performance. They're building a PC. All the estimates and leaks basically put it at $1,000. And because Sony is so dominant in the market, I mean, they could easily just charge $1,000 regardless of what they spend on the PS6 itself. But they've been here before. The PS3 era was kind of a disaster for them. It basically almost killed the entire Sony company because PlayStation was holding it on its back. Then they had to work really hard behind the scenes to start stripping things out, like the SD card ports and the built-in PS2. Like they had actual PS2 hardware built into the PS3, and then eventually they were able to get it down to $300 where it arguably should have been. And there are still a few people sticking around at Sony who were there during that era, so I don't think, you know, they juiced the price that much. And I especially feel that way after reading what Kepler had to say on the topic. If you don't know who Kepler is, basically this person and Tom from Moore's Law is Dead are my two go-to sources for everything related to PlayStation hardware, because just putting it simply, they're right more often than they're not, and their track record is as close to 100% as a leakers could ever be. So like when Kepler or Tom from Moore's Law is Dead say something, I implicitly trust it. So there's actually two parts to this equation, the price and the expected release window. As far as the price goes, it's basically like if you take the cost of all the parts and cram them together and then add it up, the total you get is like just over $700, which means if Sony wanted to do what they've done every generation before the PS5, they could charge $699 for it and really just lock in that market dominance that they already have, just like make it, you know, a done deal right out of the gate. And there is precedent for them doing that. Like I mentioned, the last 4 generations before the PS5, that was what we were dealing with. So there is precedent set. We don't know if, you know, they're going to change their minds on any of this, especially considering that they want to keep the PS5 around for a long time, just like they did with the PS4 this generation. But, you know, $699 seems like a pretty solid price for the performance targets they're chasing. It's basically double the performance of the current PS5, which puts it at like, I don't know, 50% better than the PS5 Pro. I really hope they invest in a good CPU for this thing, because that's really what's holding back all consoles is bad CPU performance relative to even mid-grade PCs. But like, that's still a little ways off, so we'll talk about that later. And you know, $699 doesn't seem all that bad. It's not great though, especially considering just 6 years ago, the PS5 launched at $500 or $400. I feel like that $400 one was a good sweet spot, because even though I like physical games, I know a lot of you like physical games, the vast majority of people who pick up any console don't really care. If they can get the convenience of downloading a digital game to their console, that makes the decision to forego the disc drive a lot easier. And just like in the 6 years since then, everyone's kind of moved on from physical games to the point where like 75% of people who play on PlayStations are downloading digital games versus buying physical, even though you can get them cheaper in a lot of cases. And even though it's not that big of a deal to install a game off a disc, people have chosen, and they've chosen digital games. So like knowing that that $400 option was there, a $300 price increase in one generation is kind of unheard of, but it's a completely different scenario to the PS3 era. Everything is more expensive, like the Switch 2 being $450, the Xbox Series X being in the $700 range if you want the 2TB one with the disc drive, the Project Helix rumors putting it at $1,000. Suddenly $699 seems like a deal. And they could also do the exact same thing they did last generation, where that $699 price gives you it without a disc drive, and then $799 includes the disc drive. You pay a tax for being a hardcore fan, which I still disagree with, but what are you going to do? People have chosen, they chose digital games. So if it does come in at $700, I think you're going to see people doing what they did this generation, aka holding on to their PS5s. And since so many people this weekend specifically went out and bought PS5 Pros, combined with the amount of people who bought PS5 Pros to get in on Resident Evil Requiem's amazing graphics, I think those people are going to be more incentivized to hold on to that thing, because moving on to the second part of this equation, the release window, we've had this go back and forth for the past few months, right? Like some people are coming out and saying, no, they're rethinking everything. They might not hit that 2027 window. We might be waiting till the 2029 release of the PS6. And like, I'm fine with that personally. Like the PS5 Pro is really good. We could see a situation where, you know, towards the tail end, like this year, we start to see it falling behind, and then suddenly everyone wants a PS6. But just being objective and I guess fair here, we've had even more verifiable sources like Jason Schreier come out and say, hell no, if they want to do 2027, they're going to do 2027. And it looks like they want to do 2027. And now Kepler is backing that up. I mean, theoretically, they say AMD, if they have these chips ready for 2027, they could give them to other buyers, because they all pass around chips all over the place. Like the Steam Deck's chip was actually built for a Surface laptop for Microsoft that they ended up not shipping. So like that happens all the time. But even though it happens, Sony is committed to 2027, and it looks like they're going to hit that window. I don't think this is going to be a record-breaking launch like we saw with the PS5 and even the PS4. I think things are going to be messy again at the beginning of the generation. So I'm excited to talk about it and see how it all plays out. But it's just weird. Like you feel like after everything that happened in 2020, we were finally getting out of that. Things were getting back to normal. But like, do you guys just feel like everything's different? Like everything's just a little less saturated when you're outside? I know I see Instagram reels or TikToks that show this, but like, it's been weird ever since 2020. It's like the timeline kind of diverged, and it's like every time we start to get the ball rolling again to getting back to just happiness and normalcy, as something like this RAM crisis, the storage crisis, the generation not shaking out correctly comes out of nowhere and just derails things. So hopefully at some point things can get back to normal, but who knows? I mean, you never see this stuff coming, it seems, or at least I don't. But moving on to the second news story here, let's talk about Sony committing to consoles. So the whole Saros situation, they did some previews and everyone was kind of looking at that, expecting journalists to ask the dev team if they are planning on shipping a PC version. And they kind of left it up in the air, if we're being honest. They said, we're just talking about the PS5 release of Saros today. So that kind of like gave people some hope on the PC side of the fence that, you know, the like 10% of the audience that PS5 gets on these single player games would be able to play these games on PC a year or two later and keep that business alive. But then Jason Schreier brought it all crashing down and was like, look guys, I know you want the PS5 games on PC, but unless it's a live service or a multiplayer game, it's off the table, Saros included. And it brought back the entire conversation where like people are upset on one side and people are like whatever on the other. I mean, I'm holding firm on this. I don't like this conversation at all. I think it's kind of like a done deal already, so it's not even worth relitigating constantly over and over again like you see on Twitter. But like, I like exclusives. I think over the years I've always had a better experience with exclusives than most third-party games. Not all, like Red Dead Redemption 2 exists and plenty of other third-party games are excellent, but like the games over the past two generations that really pushed things forward tended to come from either Nintendo or Sony, like Breath of the Wild, or, you know, the myriad of third-person action adventure games that Sony put out. You can see their influence across the entire games industry. And like, when Nintendo does an exclusive, no one says anything. They're just like, yeah, I mean, it'd be cool if eventually I could play this on PC or PS5, but, you know, they sell well. They have dedicated fans who show up and buy their games. That's where Sony has kind of had some issues this generation, but I think it's cool that their fans are speaking with their wallets. Yeah, I think it's cool that Sony's sticking with console exclusives because we've lived through this era of them putting games on PC. And while I don't necessarily think that hurt their sales in any way, I think it's really up to the types of games they've been making this generation. Most of all, I also think it hurt the brand in the sense that like it removed the community aspect, that cool club you were in where like you bet on the PlayStation horse, you get the PlayStation exclusives, and you're happy with that purchase. The idea that you can build a PC and not miss out kind of just removes any of the urgency to buy a PlayStation 5, which in one respect is a good thing, but in another, in the way that you want the PlayStation brand to survive and thrive, is also bad. So, you know, I think it's good overall. I get that everyone has a different opinion and I get shredded for this for some reason, but it really isn't that deep. It's just video games at the end of the day. And like I said at the beginning, they're already doing it. We don't have a seat at the table. We're not on the board, and it's already decided. So like, yeah, I don't think the backlash is big enough to really make a meaningful difference. And, you know, PC players had a huge opportunity to show up and prove to Sony that they wanted to play these games, and they just simply didn't. So, I mean, there's a lot of blame to go around, but I don't think it's like a bad situation at the end of the day. So that's my thoughts on it. Let me know yours down in the comments below. But let's run out the video talking about the hot new game, Crimson Desert. I put some real time into this game over the weekend. I put about, I don't know, 10 or 12 hours in since I finally started playing it, and I think it's pretty good. I'm like right at the point where it's starting to hook me, but that first 10 hours was pretty grueling. Like, I know that for a lot of people, the idea of getting a brand new open world to just run out and explore is awesome, but I've played so many open world games that they have to do something really cool or interesting to really hook me, and none of that cool stuff really starts coming up until you get through the prologue and then the first chapter and the second chapter and the third chapter. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I was not feeling this game until I hit the fourth chapter, and then I had the camp set up, and then it's like, go nuts, go forth and explore. And I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. Once you start getting some upgrades, once you start getting some skill points, once you start doing the puzzles, the Breath of the Wild inspired stuff, like I found this cave that had a door and there was these vines on it, so I used fire to light the vines on fire. Then I pushed the door, then I had to solve a puzzle in the cave, and I got a really cool item for it. That's like dopamine hit for me. I think I have to bleep that, but you know what I said. I love that stuff. So I know people get really testy if you say to give a game 10 hours or so to really start getting good, but in the context of Crimson Desert, it's like a 300 or 400 hour game. It can apparently go on as long as you really want it to, and you can mainline the story if you start to get bored. 10 hours percentage wise in the grand scheme of that is really nothing. So I don't think it's great when games ask you to commit a lot, but I'm also not the kind of player who needs everything to be simple, hand-holdy spelled out for me. The one thing that annoyed me in Resident Evil Requiem, for example, is when you get to the part with the building that's toppled over and you're standing on the windows. Like, I intuitively knew that I could probably shoot the windows and let the zombies fall through, but then there's this giant menu that pops up and just pauses the game, and it's like, hey, did you know you can shoot the windows for the zombies to fall through? And it's like, I guess I just grew up in an era where, like, you know, you might run through it and die, and then maybe you shoot the floor and fall through it and then die and start back at the checkpoint, and then you know from that point. I don't need the game to tell me everything. I think it sucked in Horizon Forbidden West as well, when Aloy just won't shut the fuck up with things you can do in the immediate area, like, oh, I think I should upgrade my skill tree and stuff like that. I wish you could turn that stuff off in games and figure it out naturally. I like that it was kind of like one at a time feeding me all the millions of mechanics this game has, and I don't mind that once you get past that point, it really starts to open up and just throw you to the wolves. So it's giving me the best of both things that I really like. Odds are you're already playing it, but if you were on the fence like I sort of was, now hopefully that recommendation makes you go over the fence and buy the game, because, you know, it's going to keep you busy for a long time. Anyway, guys, that's all I've got for you in today's video. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.